He is Sports Illustrated's writer of the MMQB, one of the best information individuals in our business, and longtime friend of the program, Albert Breer, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Albert?
Hey, Rich, what's happening?
I am great, and everything's great, and I'm glad that you are here. Normally, I don't box you in like this, Albert.
Yep.
But you may not answer this question with because they can, okay? That is not that is not an acceptable answer, even though it might be the ultimate answer. But why didn't Saquon Barkley get a long-term deal from the Giants on Monday? Why not?
Because I think both sides were more entrenched in their positions than I figured they would be. And it looks like a workable divide, right? And, earlier in the offseason, I think Mike Florio reported this, and this was, I believe, right before the deadline to tag guys back in March, that the Giants, who were working on the Daniel Jones deal at the time, were at $13 million. Saquon was at $16 million. Now the guaranteed money is obviously a part of that. Then the deadline passes, the Giants pull the offer. That may or may not have had a material effect on the tenor of negotiations. But the reason I thought it was going to get done, Rich, honestly, there was, I think, ample motivation on both sides. I mean, look, Saquon's even further into his career than a lot of these other guys are. He's played for 5 years now. He's had an extensive injury history. And if he's going to bet on himself, this year, then, it's going to be a bet that there's going to be a pot of gold for him there in March of 2024, which, is going to be his 7th year in the league, which is really old for a running back. So, I felt like the motivation at the end would be to take every dime you can and call it a day, because it is a shaky proposition going forward without a deal now if you're him. And then for the Giants, I just think he meant so much to Joe Shane and Brian Daboll in building their program, over the last year and turning the Giants around and turning Daniel Jones around. And, God, what a great message that would send to the locker room, and getting a guy who has meant so much to what you've done to build the place up rewarded, that I thought that they'd be motivated to do it, even if, from a principle standpoint, they may be, and look, this is where they come from. They come from Buffalo, right? Like they may be more attuned to investing deeper at premium positions than they would be at a position like running back. But ultimately, in the end, I think, I probably am guilty of this, because I woke up Monday morning thinking they were going to get something done. They were a little bit more entrenched in their positions than we would have thought.
Well, how far apart are they? I mean, if it is just $16 million opposed to $13 million, so it's $3 million here, then $3 million there, and $3 million there. Is it really just the cost of maybe his 1 year of his tender over the life of the contract? And how does that fall apart like that, or is it not that simple?
And my suspicion is, Rich, knowing what I know about this, that it may have come down to how much money was guaranteed in the third year. That'd be my guess, anyway. I made this argument in the column this morning that, let's just say the Giants only wanted to guarantee 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. And let's say the Giants guaranteed $28 million over the next 2 years, okay? And then the third year is a de facto team option. Even in that case, Saquon would be walking away from $18 million that he's not going to get as part of the franchise tag. So now he has to make that $18 million up next year, again, when he'll be going into year 7. And is he going to be able to make that $18 million up? I think the Giants maybe figured, eventually he would take that, and it'd be difficult for them to guarantee money in the year 8 with Saquon, which again is a very down the line for a running back. And, I think Saquon's probably, his position was probably feeling like I gotta, protect myself from an injury standpoint, where we are and where I am in my career. And, I need at least a part of the third year guaranteed. So that'd be my guess, but there were a lot of moving parts in this negotiation for sure.
So what happens now with him and let me pause. What happened with Josh Jacobs? My colleague Tom Pelissero said that he was sitting in a car outside the facility with Max Crosby, thinking this was going to get done so he could go right to work, and that didn't happen. Or is that?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that the effort was really made. You know, they made a very strong effort, and you know, I know the Raiders have tried to be as communicative as possible with Jacobs, and yeah, I mean, I just think that's another one where, you know, my sense would be that the guarantees in the third year are part of the problem. You know, the average per year, I think you can kind of work through that stuff. But guaranteeing players money into a third year, especially at that position, especially where, you know, in the case of Saquon, you'd be talking about his 8th year in the league. The case of Josh, you'd be talking about his 7th year in the league. Yeah, I don't think that one got like contentious in the room, you know, between the Raiders and Josh Jacobs people. But obviously, like, you know, I think you had like Tom said, you know, I didn't have the detail on him being in the car, but I know he was at the facility yesterday. I think Josh Jacobs was motivated to get something done. You know, and this is another one. I do think like one of the similarities here, and these are not the same, you know, but one of the similarities here is that, like, just like, you know, Saquon meant a lot for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane in year one in New York. Josh Jacobs obviously meant a lot and shouldered a heavy load in year one for Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler in Vegas. And so, you know, it's interesting because I just think like a lot of us do focus on the average per year, and I understand it's an easy number to go off of, but guarantees are always important. And I think at this position in particular, you know, going to that third year for a running back can be a tough pill to swallow for a team. Whereas for a player, he obviously wants to protect against the chance that there's a downturn, which makes him motivated to really push on that third year.
I don't get it. I honestly don't. I mean, you're sitting here saying third year, and I know you point out, you know, Joe Shane's from Buffalo where they didn't pay guys, and then, you know, McDaniels is from New England where, you know, they won a Super Bowl with Sony Michel, LeGarrette Blount, Jonas Gray, Antoine Smith, so on and so forth. But,
I know.
But hold on a second. I'm not done with it. But yeah, their current quarterback, you know, Josh Allen's not walking through that door in New Jersey, and Tom Brady, you know, I think I'm confident in saying it's not walking through that door in Las Vegas.
I guess you never say never.
You know, well, not as a player, he's not walking through that door, right? But so that's the point. I mean, we just had Marshall Faulk, who called in hour one and saying this is all because of the way that they pay quarterbacks and push up guys like Daniel Jones and Jimmy Garoppolo, who I am lumping together because they're not in the Burrow and the Mahomes and Allen class, Rodgers class. They're not in them in terms of decoration and widely held belief amongst folks like us to have that same success. So, you know, how in the world is Saquon not as valuable, like for a third year to make happy in year 1 and 2, you know, as you're trying to win now? I don't get. I don't understand it. I don't.
Yeah, I would say, well, there are a couple things. Like, number one, I think it's how, like, teams view this position as replaceable. And it's really, really hard to replace a quarterback, right? It's really hard to replace a top corner. It's really hard to replace a number one receiver. It's hard to replace a top left tackle. You know, like, I mean, look at the two teams in the Super Bowl, right? The Chiefs had a 7th-round rookie in Isaiah Pacheco at running back. The Eagles had a guy in Miles Sanders who was on a rookie contract who they let walk, even though he only got $6 million a year from another team. So those are the two teams that were in the Super Bowl. You know, I also think the franchise tag, you know, hurts these guys because it's such an affordable thing for these teams, so they have that to fall back on. You know, and it's like, okay, well, if we don't want to give this guy guarantees into the third year when we think he might be done, well, you know, he's going to show up anyway in week 1. And it's cold, it's callous, but it's probably true. You know, I mean, that these guys are going to show up. And then I think the third thing is, you know, teams, you know how I hate to use the cliche that it's a copycat league, but you know, like, I mean, with what the Rams did, you know, like, there's this focus on premium positions. And if you look at, like, the Rams, right, for example, like, because they've been sort of a model now, you know, there was a point there where, you know, Sean McVay and Les Snead, those guys, moved away from paying running backs like Todd Gurley and off-ball linebackers like Alec Ogletree, and they went all in on premium positions. They paid Aaron Donald. They paid Cooper Kupp. They paid Jalen Ramsey. They paid Andrew Whitworth. They paid Matthew Stafford, right? And so, like, I think if you look at it, and this is an amazing thing, and I had this in Twitter earlier today. If you look at it, there are 56 players across the NFL that are paid $20 million a year or more. 17 of them are quarterbacks, 13 of them are wide receivers, 9 of them are interior D linemen, 7 of them are edge rushers, 5 of them are offensive tackles. So 51 of the 56 play 5 positions, So it's just sort of where the league's going. That's the other part of it. So, and look, like I would argue, I think the argument against that is sound too, which the argument against that is, well, like these guys are mean a lot to their teams, and their offenses are built around them, which makes them different. And if you look at guys the teams have paid on the whole, they haven't regretted those contracts. So guys who are truly, the kind of guy you build your offense around. The Titans don't regret paying Derrick Henry. The Browns don't regret paying Nick Chubb. I think even like the Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott, the Vikings and Dalvin Cook, it didn't work out at the end, but I don't think they would say that was money poorly spent based on what those guys meant to those teams.
Right, and the interesting thing is that the team that runs the offense that might make running backs the most fungible is the team that employs the highest paid running back in San Francisco. And the question I have is, if the Niners had somebody at the quarterback position that they were paying like the Rams pay Stafford and like the way that the Chiefs pay Mahomes and so on and so forth, would they sacrifice Christian McCaffrey? Would they treat the running back position like everybody else? And that they don't because they don't have the quarterback that is paid that money and they have that luxury? Do running backs need to seek out teams with quarterbacks on their first year contract for them to get paid? Because, I don't know if it's good for this league that running backs are more valuable in fantasy football than they are in reality football. Albert?
Here's what's fascinating about it, Rich. Like McCaffrey would have been the cautionary tale until he got traded to the Niners, right? And now all of a sudden, he's the poster boy for paying a running back. So what does that tell you? Because they paid him in Carolina after 3 years, and then he couldn't stay on the field. He was great 17 through 19. They pay him in 20 and 21. He couldn't stay on the field, and then 2022 he's dynamite, and he comes and he gets traded, and now he goes to San Francisco, and now you see like the value of a running back who can give you something in the passing game too, and who can be kind of that chess piece for you, which I think is a huge part of it too, is like which of these guys can give you something in the passing game. And that's where a guy like a Kamara is so valuable. And even like the Barkleys and the Zekes and the Gurleys and the Mixons, like those guys are, they're not Kamara, but for bigger backs, they're really good in the passing game, So that's sort of I think that's the risk, for teams. Is like, okay, like the one thing, like even if I really love the player and I think that he's a unicorn at that position, the problem that I run into is it could be what happened to Christian McCaffrey, where Christian McCaffrey, I can remember when he was coming out, Rich, he had incredibly clean medicals, and then he stayed healthy his first 3 years in the league, and then he signs the contract, and all of a sudden he can't stay healthy for 2 years in a row. Saquon, same thing. I had a team tell me Saquon, his medical profile coming out of Penn State was similar to a kicker's. Like that is how clean he was medically. And he gets to the league and he can't stay on the field, So that's part of it too. It's a complex thing, and I think we make a mistake sometimes of thinking this is like a straight line thing. There's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, these are tough decisions to make. Now, I would argue like that if you're going to pay Saquon, say $14 or $15 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. You're basically paying him what the Broncos pay Cortland Sutton, what the Raiders pay Hunter Renfrow.
Exactly.
And I don't think
that's what I'm saying. Is it's apples to apples, and so that's the thing. We had Austin Eckler on the show last week. He's like, I'm making the same as a third wide receiver on the team. It pisses me off, And it should. Damn well it should. It should piss off anybody in any line of work, and that's the whole thing I don't understand. And I think receivers are coming out of college right now at an alarming rate. And so are wide receivers next? Could they be the next running back group? Or this is just, the tight ends are already becoming the next running back group? But I understand, that tight ends are are valuable, and we see how terrific they are with their, university and we see how terrific they are with their university and everything in June. But what's next? Could receivers be next on this hit list?
And you know what I think the other thing that, like, here's what I think, like, it's just worth everybody paying attention to this part of it. I think analytics are a huge part of this. Like, so many teams have built out analytics departments now,
right?
And so it's not like guessing anymore. You know what I mean? Like, in a lot of cases, like, I know it's been going on in baseball forever, right? But no, we're not guessing. We're putting a value on your head. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we think you're worth, or this is the probability that you're gonna, that contract's gonna wind up looking like a good one for us. And this is like across the board. Like, this is happening. I mean, I think we're gonna, like, the impact of analytics in the NFL. Even though you can't see it because teams are very secretive about this stuff, I think is profound in a lot of different ways. And this is one of them, where positional value, I would say, has almost been overemphasized over the last few years because owners are empowering analytics people, and the analytics people have data that backs up these sorts of decisions. And so, I mean, as you can, I know I sound like I'm all over the map, but it truly is something that, like, there's just so many different ways to take this. I mean, I can remember. So, and I think this was 2016, 17, whatever. And I was at the Saints, and I was with one of their guys on the sidelines at one of their practices, and we're just catching up and everything else.
Yeah.
And he goes to me, he says, like, well, look at Michael Thomas out there, and he's like, Mike's a great player for us. He's like, do you realize Mike touches the ball less than half as much as Mark Ingram does? Like, on what planet does it make sense that he's making 4 times as much as he is? And I thought about that, and he's like, that probably should count for something too. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just an interesting argument that has so many different tentacles to it, which I think is why it's so interesting for all of us to talk about it whenever one of these situations arises.
And that's why it's kind of a false equivalency of saying, well, name me the last Super Bowl winner that had a highly paid running back or a league's leading rusher on it. And the reason why they don't is because most of the quarterbacks that have won the Super Bowl are named Brady and Mahomes the last few years. And so it's not fair.
So
to
the
say
offenses are built around those guys.
Right.
You don't need as much of your running team.
That's why you're able. That's why if you have Mahomes, then you can win a Super Bowl with Isaiah Pacheco and Damian Williams being your leading rusher. You have that luxury. And by the way, and Kelsey on top of it. You know what I'm saying? So it's not. Obviously, it's not all Mahomes. You've got a Hall of Fame talent there, and in terms of New England, another Hall of Fame talent wearing a headset. So I get it.
I gave you the Chiefs and Eagles, right? Like what they did at running back and how they didn't invest a lot.
Right.
Another counter argument to that could be look at the teams that they played in the conference championship games. Both those teams, the Niners and Bengals, had highly paid running backs, like guys who were paid, top 5 salaries in the league at the position, right? And Joe Mixon and Christian McCaffrey. So it's not like you can't get there. I mean, I don't think you or I would have been shocked if the Bengals and Niners had beaten the Chiefs and Eagles on that Sunday, and then we'd be talking about something else entirely. That argument that I made earlier would be dead, right? So I don't know. I mean, it's so complicated, and it's just, and I think I think if you're going to if you're really going to bottom line it. Like, I think what NFL teams would tell you is we're not on these contracts. We're not paying for past performance. We're paying for what we project them to be into the future. And
unless it's a quarterback,
that's probably the biggest thing.
Unless it's a quarterback, Albert. Unless it's a quarterback, like
but
that.
They get paid for how they're because those guys can play deep into their 30s.
I guess
you are paying for future performance there.
Okay, so last one for you. How does this affect Dalvin Cook, who is definitely, I would think, the most sought-after running back that's sitting out there, with all due respect to Kareem Hunt. And by the way, Kareem Hunt and Zeke are sitting at home, and those are, by the way, 2 of the last, hold on a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 of the last 5 leading rushers in the NFL are sitting at home right now.
Yeah.
With Dalvin Cook out there also. Like, what does Dalvin Cook's market look like? When does it pop? And give me an estimation on what that number he's going to sign for starts with, Albert.
Okay. Well, my guess would be, I don't know, we'd probably be talking somewhere in the neighborhood of like what Miles Sanders and David Montgomery got at the top of the running back market free agency, which was 6, maybe a little more than that. I guess you'd pack in some incentives that would help him get closer to being whole to what he was supposed to make on his Vikings contract. As for like who is interested, I think that the AFC East is the place to look. The Dolphins, part of this for them is, and they were almost, I'm talking about the deal, the trade was on the doorstep of getting done in March. Mm-hmm. The Dolphins got cold feet at the end, but there was almost a trade that would have sent Dalvin Cook to Miami back in March. Now, one of the things the Dolphins saw in him was adding an element of speed and explosiveness, like a big play threat, to their backfield back then. They drafted Devin Achane in the second round out of Texas A&M. So, like, how he does early in camp could affect, and how he did in the spring could affect how the Dolphins approach Cook. The Jets, I would absolutely watch the Jets. I think one of the ways that they see Dalvin Cook internally is somebody who could allow them to be more judicious in bringing Brees Hall back, who obviously they think a lot of. They can be a little bit, I would say, a little bit more on the cautious side with Hall if they have, a guy that they feel like can kind of hold the rope while Hall is getting himself back to 100%. And then the Patriots had that money earmarked for DeAndre Hopkins that they could turn around and go and offer to Dalvin Cook now. And I think New England's looking to add another element to their offense that they don't have right now. And I think Cook could kind of complement Ramondre Stevenson in their backfield pretty nicely. So those would be the teams I would watch. Again, like my guess would be like you're not going to see anything crazy, but monetarily. But it would seem to me like the right number would be right in that range that the top running backs in the free agent market got back in March.
Albert, you are the man. When do I see you in Los Angeles? You're coming out for Rams, Chargers, Cowboys, doing that whole business?
Yeah, so I'm thinking somewhere. I know this is very, very vague, but somewhere in August. The problem right now, I'm still waiting for a couple of teams, and like this whole putting the camp trip together is like a jigsaw puzzle. Yep. Where if one thing goes wrong, the whole thing falls apart, and then you got to build the thing back up. So, but I'm thinking that second or third week of August, I'll be out there, and I'll definitely swing by El Segundo. And where in between Mike Shanahan and George Hamilton is your tan currently ranked right now, Albert? What do we got? I would say I was like I would give myself like a 9 like last Friday when I left the island. I'm probably down to like a 7.5 right now. But Albert, by the time you see me though, like I'm going to be back up there. For those who don't know, I would say like my ability to tan might not be number 1 on my list of abilities, but it's definitely top 5 and not number 5. Okay, we got to get you more scarlet and not gray. Okay, Albert, let's go. Focus. Get that bass going. Get that bass going. We'll chat. I promise you this, Rick. I will have my game face on when I'm in the studio. Attaboy. We'll see you soon. Be well, Albert. Thanks for the time. Thanks, Rich. The great Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.